Everybody, we got Hugh Hansen here, and I think you all know the story. Hugh and I worked at Gruens. We talked for probably at least 5 hours a week, discussing worldviews and whatnot. And also, Hugh is my main go-to guy when I don't know about something, and I'm probably his main go-to guy when he wants to tell me about something. So he's going to share with us today a little bit of a tip and a little bit of a trick and a little bit of a tool idea. And so I'm gonna let you take off with that, Hugh.
Okay. Well, I was just gonna offer everybody my methods for gluing back braces, but kind of braces in general. But it was, if you recall, back in our days at Gruens, we were always kind of trying to figure out ways of gluing kind of challenging circumstances of back braces. And there was all kinds of little gizmos and doodads and everything, and brace jacks and modified clamps and everything. And I don't exactly remember where, but it kind of popped into my mind one day to use the black Stumac brace clamps as a way to glue back braces. So I've got, I can go over a little bit of like what I do and how I do it.
Yeah.
I'll try to, I'll move this camera around so you can hopefully see. I've got a guitar over here that doesn't really have a loose back brace. It just so happens I don't have one of those.
We'll pretend. I've got a good imagination.
This will be a simulated repair. But okay, well, so let me move this around a little bit. My brace clamps, they kind of live in a state of disassembly. They I kind of have them all taken apart, and I put together a set of calls that I make out of either aluminum or plastic or whatever happens to be handy. And I thread them, I cut them and cut different contours on them. Some of them are for the ends of braces. Some of them are for just weird random shapes. Some of them are for like restoring arch in like sunken instruments. But these are, as I'm sure Dan is aware, these are 5/16 18 thread on these brace clamps. And so you can take them apart and thread these. I use a 5/16 18 bottoming tap to do that. You just drill yourself a 1/4 inch hole and cut some threads in there.
Bottoming tap means that you're cutting threads all the way to the bottom of the hole, correct?
Yes, that'll cut your threads all the way down to the bottom of your hole, so it's not tapered. I think sometimes people call it like a plug cutting tap or bottoming tap. But let me move this guitar into place and kind of just show you how it works.
I see what's coming here. Oh yeah.
Hugh, what's your paper towel there? Are those regular paper towels or are those like
That is a Kirkland signature paper towel.
Straight from Costco, you say?
Straight from Costco, yeah.
Do you get do you get a hold of some of the little mini quiches? Are those still available, or is that?
I don't know. If they have like a paleo mini quiche, I might go for it. All right. So this is the 34 jumbo, by the way. I'm cheating a little bit because somebody gave me some extra room in the sound hole by installing a de-arm and pickup at one time. So I've taken this clamp apart like so. I flipped this around. I have cut a little piece of ultra high molecular weight plastic and just contoured it on my spindle sander. I've added a second nut onto here so that
cool.
When I rotate it, it'll stay into place. And so I can put this inside, rest it right down on the top of that brace. I've got a little piece of masonite under here to back it, so that I have something solid to push against. So I wouldn't ever, like, punch a hole through the back of the guitar or anything accidentally. I'll put the clamp up here like this, kind of add some sort of piece of something or other to keep it stable. And then if I take a quick grip, I can come down on the top of this. And so this is kind of free floating at this point. So it's basically just applying pressure in between that clamping caul and the back side of this clamp here.
Yeah.
And once I've got some pressure on it, I'll slide a little something underneath here to stabilize this. Otherwise it can kick out and make a real bad situation. Then, once you've got that all in place, you can add just a little more pressure. You want to be very mindful of how much pressure you're adding to the top. But you can really actually apply quite a lot of pressure this way to back braces, and you can get one of these in here. You can get two of them in here. You can get three. If I need some pressure like out in the middle of here, I'm probably using more like a cam clamp to do that. And so, yeah, you just, based on whatever length you need, you're going to use whatever clamp you have. I've got some C clamps that I've taken apart that I can get to these sort of braces up here with. So with these cauls here, I've got all kinds of them. Aluminum really is the preferred material for this, but this clamp right here, this one is a very narrow one. Just a couple months ago, I had a 1935 Martin F7 archtop in here with every single back brace in it loose, and I was able to successfully re-glue every back brace in that guitar through the F holes by this method, and I just can't think of any other way that you could accomplish that. When I'm going to put the glue in, I've just got like a syringe and a pipette sort of thing like that. If it's I can move this here now.
Well, go back to the syringe and the pipette really quick. I guess I don't fully understand what's happening there.
I've just snipped a pipette off, just kind of force it down onto a syringe. This has got tight bond in it. I've got this one actually, I believe, is two pipettes that are kind of stuck together in the middle. Got a little wire on it that I can bend. So I don't put very much effort into making these real pretty, because they have a limited shelf life.
Yeah.
And when it's time to get another one, you just toss it.
So does the bulbous end of the pipette go under the brace? Oh no, is that a knife on there, or?
No, this is the bulbous end of the pipette here just has some water in it.
Oh, okay.
And that just keeps the tip of that from crusting over.
Oh.
Keeps the glue in there fresh. And so
would that work on my Tight Bond bottle too?
Anytime I'm going to use it, I'll squirt some of this out of here. So I've got always putting fresh glue in there. But
okay.
Otherwise, like if I'm gluing a hide glue brace, I will use the old brown glue. Regular hot hide does not work particularly well for brace gluing, because it's very difficult to get it in there and get a good joint and get it in there fast enough. If you're not getting it in there fast enough and it's gelling before you've had a chance to clamp it, then you've kind of defeated the purpose of using it. The old brown glue gives you a adequate working time, but I mean, the vast majority of loose back braces that you're going to run into are on Gibsons from the 40s and 50s and 60s when they used. I don't know for certain. I was always the word at Grunes was always that it was a glue called Cascamite, which was a urea formaldehyde resin glue. It's if you're looking at a Gibson from any time from the late 30s up into the 60s. It is the milky beige colored kind of opaque glue that you'll see squeezed out. And it really just has a habit of letting go. And so when you run into guitars, I know like you're on your SJ, Ian, where every brace in the whole thing is loose. That's it. But during those years, Gibson being Gibson, you could have two guitars from the same year and one of them would be hide glue and one of them would be Cascamite.
What was that red glue that they used too? I ran into a red glue on an L37. I was like, this thing will just pop right apart. And boy, that stuff was tough.
That I'm not sure what that is, but I think that it is something similar to that. I think that it's a similar sort of a resin glue, and that stuff can either be really tough or it can. I mean, I popped the neck off of or was trying to pop the neck off of a 52, I don't know, LG something or other. And I had steamed it for a while and thought that it was about ready to go. And I flexed it one way and the back popped loose about down to the waist. And I flexed it the other way. And then the back popped loose the rest of the way down to the waist. And then I flexed it a little bit more and the top came loose from the from the block. So eventually I had a completely liberated block floating around inside the guitar with the
oh my god.
They always glued the necks in with hide glue. I've never seen
and it's the most beautiful joint. I don't know if you remember with that SJ, I had to slide the neck in the neck block out the sides to get it out because it was the same thing. The top let go, the back let go. There was nothing to lever against. It was just and yeah, that is the most perfectly glued hide glue neck joint when they do that too. Like it's just like bulletproof.
Yeah, well, so in that case I had to stop and clamp everything together to hold it in place to allow me to wiggle the neck out. But then but anyway, when it's Cascamite glue like that and the braces pop loose, you're not really gluing. Tight bond doesn't really stick very well to other tight bond. It's never the actual joint that is coming apart. There's always a skin of wood that comes off with it. So that's why tight bond makes a pretty effective glue for that. If it's hide glue and it's loose, which those often aren't loose, but if they are, then the a little bit of heat and moisture from working the old brown glue will make the old glue and the new glue kind of coalesce, and you'll get a pretty good joint that way.
Are you warming the brown glue a little bit, or?
Yeah, that one you're going to warm that up to about 120, 130.
Oh, really? There. I thought it was a cold glue, but is the old brown glue, is that like kind of infinitely repairable like hide glue is too? You can just like if for some reason you miss it.
It's just hot hide glue that has urea added to it.
So yeah, getting to the broken joints that you're regluing. So you're not going in there and spending a lot of time trying to dig out old glue. I know that sometimes I've heard people recommend going in there and sanding those out, but that's not for the most part, that's not your technique.
No, that often results in a brace that doesn't really fit down to the back very well anymore. Yeah. If there's debris in there, if there's like little bits of crusted up glue, you can use a a high-tech device
Uh-huh.
such as this to kind of poke it in there and
Uh-huh.
get that out of there.
I know.
I don't know if StuMac sells these yet, but
Well, if you get a red handle on there, we'll talk. Okay.
yes.
The
This you can work the glue. I'll often like use gravity in your favor. You know, just put a thin bead of glue along the edge of that brace, and then I'm usually just using my hands to kind of suction that into there to get it to penetrate pretty well.
mm-hmm.
Sometimes if I need to, I will kind of work it under there with a palette knife like that. Then one of the great things about this method of brace gluing is that you still have access to clean up while it's wet. So you might be able to still get your hand in there. Otherwise, we've got some more high-tech tools such as a piece of wire with a dowel and some Q-tips stuck in it. I can clean up around those braces like that.
Yeah, because your calls are pretty tall. Like all of that clamping apparatus is up off the brace quite a ways, right? Like you've got really good access.
Well, you can adjust it to whatever it needs to be. So that's kind of a nice thing about it. You can have it sit down lower or sit down higher. You just want it adjusted so that up here you have enough room that you can because as you're clamping those brace clamps together like that, they they compress in there. So you want to make sure that you have enough room that you can get enough travel of this clamp up here to get adequate pressure onto the back.
Hey Hugh, do you think we could just like, I know this might be a little bit of a pain, but would you feel like throwing a light in there and just seeing if we can get your phone in there in some way that we can see what's going on in there? You've just went underwater in a guitar. Everybody clear on that? I think we're good, Hugh.
Okay.
We can always review that later. So those StuMac braces get pretty, or the clamps, they get pretty long. Are you ever stymied on a guitar with that technique? Has anything ever been too long for a StuMac clamp in there?
Not yet.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you. So were those Martin F-hole that F-hole guitar were those braces completely dislodged? Did you have
Absolutely.
to like? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what was your?
So sometimes you kind of need several gluing, runs on a brace that's loose all the way across. Like you're best off to like start on one end. Sometimes usually they're still kind of stuck down in the middle, but even when they're not, you just kind of start at one end, get one end down, and then work your way across. So whether you need two glue ups or three.
But how big of a pain in the ass is that if you've got a brace that's tucked into the kerfing? Are you tucking those back into the kerfing, or are you snipping them short?
If they're loose, they're not tucked into the kerfing anymore.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
The kerfing either, but you can glue them down well enough that they look like they're tucked into the kerfing.
Yeah. So are you doing anything like, so are you at all worried if you start on one end and you're going to go over to the other that you're going to be misaligned by the time you get over to the other side? Are you doing anything to align it through the F hole before you get going?
Well, you've got the center strip in the back that kind of holds it in place. I suppose you could do that. I don't. That hasn't really been a problem doing it. They kind of, I mean, they're usually still a little bit glued down, and they kind of stay in place.
So, can I ask you what you might bid for a project like that? I mean, to me, that sounds like just an excruciating experience.
No, it gets way worse than that, Ian.
Oh, I understand that. But that wouldn't be high on my list of things I'd want to do. Like what?
often guitars that have a back brace loose have several back braces loose. And so I've got multiple benches in here, and once you have all this stuff out and you've got all your gear set up and everything, it really doesn't take that long to glue one of these. And so, like, when I'm doing repair work, I'm usually working on 4, 5, 6 different things at a time. And so, like a lot of restorations just consist of like one gluing operation per day. And so you're gluing something and then going on to something else. And so if you're doing it like that, it's really, I mean, you saw how long it took to set that up and clamp that. Obviously, if I was gluing it and if I was putting, cleaning it up and everything, it'd be longer. But I don't think it doesn't usually. I mean, if I'm spending a half an hour on it, that's a fairly long time. So you kind of, and different ones are harder to get to than others.
Yeah.
If you're having to modify, like if you're working through F holes or anything like that, obviously it's gonna take longer. But
yeah, I suppose, yeah, that's right. But so you got like a half an hour over what do they got, like five back braces in there? So 5 10 half-hour sessions, probably something like that.
Yeah, whatever you bill your time at.
Plus you got to factor in the I don't want to do that factor, but
I've glued,
made peace with it.
I'm hundreds for sure this way, and I've never had a problem with them popping loose, and I've actually come to regard this as a fairly pedestrian repair procedure.
So what's your limit for working through the sound hole? Like if on one of those Gibsons with the Cascamite where the X brace could like completely come out, are you gonna glue an X brace in its entirety through the sound hole, or are you gonna start popping backs and stuff like that?
I have never taken a back off for the purpose of gluing braces.
So you've done a stem to stern X brace through the sound hole, or has that not come up?
Yeah, you just break them up into bite-sized pieces and glue them as they need glued. So whether it takes me a couple times, I guarantee that taking multiple sessions to glue braces is a lot less trouble than taking the back off.
Yeah. The SJ that I did, I pushed that back off with, I think I maybe slid a palette knife between the kerfing and the back a couple times, but just pretty much put my hand through it like a karate guy.
Yeah. And like a lot of my clamps, you'll see some evidence of like angle grinder activity on there.
Yeah.
This is an example right here of this one's got a little curve in the top of it. And this was, I just did this last week, but there was a 1924 Gibson F5, and the top seam was blown under, like in front of the tail block, and it had been loose for quite some time, and so it was all that tension of the tail block compressing in towards the body had kind of puckered it downward,
giving it one of these things.
Yeah, correct. And it had been glued unsuccessfully once before, so that one I ended up I made this little call for it right here like that kind of matched the proper contour of the bottom of that, and then made a call for the top side that had a notch out in the middle of it, so it had room to get pushed back up. And then I was able to get this guy in through the F hole to the right location and get it pushed back up, and it was pretty successful at that crack, because it had been glued previously with tight bond. That one was a like a colored epoxy glue up.
Yeah, because you're gonna wind. I mean, it's basically somebody had put that feature in there by trying to glue a crack shut and then depressed it, right? Like, is that what you're saying? So there was a
on a mandolin, if like it's got the that tension is coming from the tail piece,
yeah,
so that tail block is trying to turn in like
yeah,
that, and so it's like that inward and downward tension. It's kind of elongating the back and compressing the top like
yeah.
that. And so as it's pushing downward like that with the
Oh,
top
okay.
open like that, it allows the top seam to pucker inward like that. And so that can be a pretty tricky one to undo.
Did you wind up with a pretty big gap in that crack once you got it into place, or
I wound up with no gap.
no gap? So it came back up and it was ready to go. That
back to where it was supposed to be.
Awesome. So you feel like, you hit me to the G Flex stuff, and you feel like G Flex is once something's seen tight bond, like that's the next remedy, right?
I don't usually use the G Flex for cracks. I use the G Flex for gluing carbon fiber. Anytime I'm really like gluing, I use it like you're working on a Martin right now that's got you're replacing the fretboard on a whatever. So on those, I take the T-bar out so that I can prep the surface, and then when I glue the T-bar back in, I use G-Flex to glue the T-bars back in.
Okay, I thought you were using it for cracks. So on that one, did you go to 105 or
207 and 105?
Yeah.
And I'll usually heat it up a little bit to help the curing and help it penetrate.
What's the heat do to the curing? Does it speed it, or does it make it go harder?
It speeds it and it cures harder.
Cool.
It cures more thoroughly. You can heat when I'm doing a T-bar, I'll heat the actual T-bar, and I'll heat where it's going into, and heat the epoxy. It just makes everything work better.
So are you with what you're saying about the torsion of the tail block on that spot? Did you do anything to mitigate that moving forward, or were you just like, this is let's get this going and see what happens?
I added 2 small cleats to that right there, because which I don't usually do with cracks. It's got to be it's a fairly rare circumstance with cracks that I add cleats. Kind of my condition for adding cleats is if it's requiring a lot of pressure to put things back where they're supposed to be, then I will cleat it. If it goes back together, if it's pretty cool back where it is and is not actively trying to rip itself back apart, then I don't add cleats, which is that's the vast majority of crack repairs. So
had that instrument been tampered with at all? Like, was there any evidence that maybe it had been mistreated by a previous repairman that had gotten it into that state, or
it got dried out for a long time.
So that's bad for mandolins too, huh?
It is. It is.
So let's see. So that crack, because that comes up in guitars quite a bit too. The puckered crack, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so and you're saying that the getting in from the inside and alleviating that pucker by bringing the pucker up, that's pretty much it. Like that's the only way you get there.
Yeah, it's guitars tend to like pooch out more. The mandolin, it's got that tension like pushing it downward. So kind of like on a guitar, the tension tends to be, and it's usually like things that have been apart for a long time that have been under tension. And so rather than having the top move as a cohesive plane, it's applying its, tension out into different areas, that unevenly.
Yeah. We had a string of guitars at Lark Street that were beautifully cleated cracks that were wide open, and they were closed on the inside and just splayed on the outside, just about as, and then just beautifully closed on the inside with the cleats. It was very, very interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, if I was trying to splice something, like sometimes you see guitars that are really splayed open like that, and they need a splice, but they're really uneven. And of course, like the last thing that you want to get into is like a sanding adventure where you're sanding into the wood and taking off, turning a smaller job into a much larger job. So
you're saying avoid that then.
If you're smart, but if you're still wanting to try to repair it, I might, something like that, I might be tempted to cleat it first and align everything back up from the bottom, and then cut my splice from the top once it's
like almost like a tack weld or something.
Correct. So that you're not trying to clamp everything level at the same time, get it back to where it can hang out at the correct plane on its own.
You feel like telling us about your preferred method of doing splines?
Sure.
Hold on a second. Hold on. Dan, get back over here. Dan, you got a milling machine, right?
What?
I said you got a milling machine, right? Hugh's gonna tell us his way of cutting top splines now.
This is not for the faint of heart. Is probably not for the underinsured either.
You like heritage, right?
I do. I use my Stuart McDonald neck jig, my neck tensioning jig, as sort of a gurney to strap the guitar down into, and then I use the beam on the bottom side of it to go in my milling vise, and then I move it back and forth and up and down until it is perfect on my x-axis, and then I move it until it's perfect on my y-axis, and then I use the smallest cutter that I can, and I will just cut a perfect little route right down across that crack with the milling machine. And you can go all the way through the top, or you can go like 90% of the way through the top, and then you've got a nice positive stop at the bottom. Or you can go through. I mean, it takes some setup work, but it makes such a perfect cut, and it is so clean that it's the best way that I have figured out how to do it, because it really is perfect. You can make your splices down exactly to the size that you need, and a splice that fits perfectly, you're already on the road to success there.
Because a lot of splines, no matter how your touch up comes out, like or your finish work comes out, if you've got jumbo glue joints, that's what everybody sees. So you're doing a uniform thickness spline. Where are you getting your tiny end mills from now?
McMaster Car.
McMaster Car.
So yeah. So sometimes I can get them down to 20,000. Sometimes, if it's something that's already been attempted and failed, it might be a 16th, or if it's really bad, maybe an 8th. But you can just I just align it so that I can take the smallest possible cut and cover the path of that crack.
So a lot of the guitars you're working on have, they've got something going on like that. Are you doing anything is there any way to like get your cut to kind of follow that contour at all if you're dealing with like an arched instrument? Like, is there any kind of like guides that you can put on your X and Y or I guess your Z travel and
I don't think that I have tried this one yet on a arched instrument like that, but you might kind of have to freehand your depth on there.
Oh boy, I couldn't even spell my name on an Etch a Sketch. I think I'd be in trouble.
The key is to not text your friends pictures of the setup as you're doing it. You want to go dark and
yeah, real focused.
You want to go dark and be real focused, and then no communication with the outside world until you have that cut in
there. Yeah, that cut. Yeah.
What is your milling machine?
Oh, it's embarrassing.
How big is the mill?
It's a 9x42. It's a early 80s Taiwanese mill port, which is
Dan, you got some off-brand mill too, right? Like you get it done with
I've got the old mill, right, and I got that Chinese one. And I put a lot of things in the mill. Yeah.
Dan, didn't Elise just clean your shop?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to come down there. I'm coming down. I'm going to help.
Come on.
All right. Well, we'll probably both get just wound up building crazy fret files, so I'll probably never get anything done.
That's the trouble these days.
Yeah. So, getting back to the inside of mandolins, Hugh, and Tyler's question about verses. You know what? Let me just check my Patreon really quick to make sure nobody else has snuck in any questions. Does anybody have any questions? This is like how Hugh and I spend the first part of the morning on several days of the week just gabbing. And then you do what? And then you do what?
I have a question.
Yes, Dan.
On the splines, once you've put it in and you're trimming it, do you go, how low below the finish do you take that spline? How do you shave it down to where you're ready to put finish on?
That's a good question.
I usually glue it in and leave it a little bit proud, and then when I'm taking it down level, usually with chisels or files or scrapers. And then when it is very flush, I will take as tiny of a little piece of sandpaper and put it on some type of a curved caul, and then just lightly sand into just a little divot. It's maybe 5, 6, 7 thousandths below the surface of that finish.
Are you epoxy for your adhesive for putting splines in as well?
I do. I like the epoxy for that.
Yeah.
I'm usually just for the fact that it doesn't swell the wood.
Yeah, I remember spending a lot of time trying to get splines to the perfect thickness for swelling to tight bond to get them in, and boy, that was a fool's errand. So, and then like on a spline like that, like how much time are you doing touch up with them? Are you just like, this is a good spline, let's get this, there's not a lot of room to hide on spruce, is there? Like,
no, it really depends on the situation. If it's a pre-war D45, I'll spend, however, like, I mean, for everybody, there's a point where like continuing to work on it longer is not going to make it better. Like once you've reached whatever you think your best work is, then time to admit that is your best work and turn it in.
Do you have a way of determining that? Is there like a mental state that you go into where you're just like, do you have to go into the dark place before you come into the light, or
maybe?
Yeah.
If you're searching on the internet for like new careers or other ways you can make money or like that, it's probably time. You probably have gone about as far as you can go. But
that's when. Oh, go ahead.
Sometimes you put a lot of time into it and just look at it and you just kind of say no, and then it comes back off. But
Yeah.
you know, but a lot of other guitars, like if we're you know, if you're comfortable accepting the version of reality where the guitar that you're working on has got a top splice in it, then that it is what it is.
It is, yeah.
Okay. Don't you know, you just want to avoid that point of diminishing returns. So
That's true. You know, a lot of times I decide if I'm done by I'll take a picture of it with the intent to send it to you, and then immediately I'll see what I should do next.
yeah, right. Yeah.
It's something about that taking of the picture. It snaps me out of that delusional phase of
Right.
I can't seem to go past, which is like, yeah, that probably works, right? And then, you know, I've got so much time invested in it, I can't see clearly anymore.
And so much like you were discussing with Iris a few weeks back there. Good luck finding a piece of spruce that those little fibers are going to be running out at the exact same angle as the piece of spruce that you're trying to put it into. I mean, that's you're really trying to find a snowflake that matches the other snowflake that you happen to have in front of you, and you can try, you can get close and everything, but there's not really any way to paint your way out of like different refractory patterns in wood. You can make it look good from one way or the other way, or kind of bad from all ways, or kind of good from all ways. Or at the end of the day, you got to pick whichever way it is that you want it to look good, and then go with that and hope for the best.
You know, I was watching back the Iris thing, and I think one of the things that the violin people have going for them is they're not dealing with wood that has gone through a resaw. I mean, like once the wood goes through a resaw, it seems like, boy, you could wind up with pretty weird run out patterns, you know, like that, you know, like what she did was she took some hand split stuff and then picked an angle on it, and it was roughly the same angle of the project she was working on. I think that's going to get you pretty close most of the time, and boy, maple.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, on a violin, also like on a mandolin or an archtop guitar, you've got multiple runouts going.
Yeah.
You're changing with the contour. So trying to match that perfectly is really, and it's very hard to tell until you've got the piece in there and you've worked it to see really what you have there.
Yeah, it was nice hearing that she pulls stuff back out. Like she was talking about taking 3 swipes on that spline that she just in getting the wood in there. Like, oh boy. And then she's probably, like,
yeah, it's a little different if you've got the plate off and you can take it. It's a lot easier to take it back apart that way.
Yeah. Oh my God. Guitars are just, oh man, they just were not designed with any of that stuff that the violin people thought of. Like, boy, wouldn't it be great if we could take these apart? You know, like, nope, let's put binding on it. Let's put big, thick plastic binding on it. That way nobody can ever get it apart.
It's really an open question as to like how long a steel string guitar is supposed to last. So much of like what we do is really we're really in kind of like the Wild West open frontier of figuring out how to do some of these repairs, and they're repairs that were never intended when the instrument was made. We're doing stuff, prolonging things in ways that like has not been encountered, you know. So that's kind of fun. In the violin world, all those arguments were all had and settled, you know, hundreds of years ago. So
yeah, it's pretty amazing, you know, like those arguments, you know, like I would love to talk to somebody like Iris and tell her about what the unofficial Martin Guitar Forum says about original bridge plates. Like, I think they would just be like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Like, I don't know.
Why didn't you just build an arch into it in the first place?
Yeah, and put a tailpiece on it. That way it doesn't eat itself. Yeah, it's that force from the bridge plate, just like let's, this force, that's what this instrument needs. But they sound good. But that idea that, like these things might not be forever items, I think is something that's going to be hard for people to get their head around, or at least not forever items from the standpoint of, let's just endlessly futz over them, especially when, ostensibly the point of them is making a racket in the first place. Like there's plenty of ways to make a racket without constantly trying to glue a broken stick together on its ends, but so getting back to the Verzi thing, you want to talk a little bit about Verzis? Tyler had a question about that and whether or not they add anything, or what's the mandolins world consensus on, or just the archtop world consensus on Verzis these days?
Well, briefly, the Verzi was a Lloyd Loar idea that was produced by the Verzi company, and it's just a little spruce plate that attaches. It has little spruce legs that are glued onto the top, and then there's a little spruce plate that resonates, and so it's pulling vibration off of the top and creating like a secondary place for the vibrations to resonate inside the sound chamber.
It's got tiny F holes too, right?
The Verzi does have its own tiny F holes.
That's so awesome.
It's an interesting idea.
Uh-huh.
And they increase sustain, but you also can't. You can't expect to glue something onto the top plate and have its stated purpose be of like pulling vibration from the top into like a secondary place for it to resonate and not be decreasing the resonance of the top. So the conventional wisdom is that they sweeten the sound, they increase the sustain, and that's kind of the belief. A lot of people have taken them out because they want the instrument to be as loud as possible, and so if I recall correctly, Chris Thiele had Lynn Dudenbostel build a Verzi in the mandolin that he made for him, and then I think that he eventually decided that he didn't want it in there, and that was removed. And there's tons of stories of bluegrassers punching them out with whatever kind of tools they have available and taking them out and with little tweezers through the F holes and everything.
Are there any Loar mandolins doing anything besides bluegrass now anyway? Are they almost all like being sought out by kind of high profile grassers at this point?
I don't know. I think there's there's certainly a lot of that, but it's a lot of people that are just like that just collect high-end instruments and have a soft spot for those mandolins.
Is anybody looking for a Verzi? Is that a sticking point? Like if it originally came with a Verzi, are they like, is anybody casting taller dollars at stuff for having the original Verzi in there?
Well, it's funny. Like removing the Verzi tends to make them more desirable to players, but it tends to reduce their value for their originality. So,
what's the website for tracking down all the Loar information? Is that
the F5 Journal?
That's right.
It's run by Daryl Wolf.
That's right.
He does. That's a great clearinghouse of Gibson information.
And so that website will have like, if you run across a Loar and you're wondering if it had a Verzi in it originally, you can suss that out there.
Some of them have that information, but it's really just kind of a clearinghouse of available public information about it. So if it was sold at some point, or it's kind of open source, I think, as far as like where the descriptions come from. So it's kind of just a collection of everything that's publicly known about about the individual instruments. So but it's a great place to look if you run into something like that. You can see if it's on there, and it goes all the way back to the Orville, the Orville instruments, and then all the way up, I believe, into the 30s.
Yeah, those Orville instruments, man. That's some.
Joe Spam's book too, of course.
Say that again.
Joe Spam's book about the history of Gibson is a terrific resource. So he's got a whole collection of factory order numbers in there. So if you're trying to track down, usually you can kind of see that either like an ink stamp in the body or like the little ink stamp that would be on the inside of the neck block. You can find the factory order number, which is really the most reliable way of dating an instrument.
The last part of this on Tyler's thing, he wants to know, do you see any merits of auxiliary soundboards going forward? Have you seen any of the guitars or any of the instruments that are doing like double tops or any of that stuff? Have any of those darkened your bench?
No, but I've had a few Vivatones darken my bench over the years, which was after I don't know if people know this, but Lloyd Loar was fired by Gibson for using non-Gibson products in Gibson instruments, meaning Verzies. It was that was.
Wait a second. He was. I'd always heard he left because he had a crazy idea of making electric guitars or something.
Well, he did have that idea, but their official rationale for terminating him was of his relationship with Verzi as like a
conflict of interest
thing. So at any rate, he made some arch tops that had a whole second body inside the body, and it didn't really pan out. It didn't take the world by storm. And boy, if you got braces loose on the inside of a body that's on the inside of a body, then you might need to even more creative clamping solutions than the ones I've showed you today. But he tried it.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy. So Lloyd gets credited with a lot of things. Do you know? I've heard him credited with the truss rod. Is that true or false?
That is false.
That's false.
I mean, Ted McHugh holds the patent for that one. So okay. I don't know if Laura, but there wasn't. I mean, I think mid 22 is the first appearance of a Gibson truss rod.
Putting a violin F hole on a mandolin. Lloyd putting a violin F hole on a mandolin. Did Lloyd? Is that purely Lloyd's invention? Or false?
For all practical purposes, yes. Although there are a few rare oddball examples of pre-Loar F-hole mandolins. I forget the name of the maker. George would know the answer to that. Be very quick to remind you of that had been done before. But yeah, no, well, he gets credit for that. He had a pickup on his personal mandolin all the way back into the mid 20s on his a regular like modern wound pickup on his mandolin. I believe he also made an electronic keyboard somewhere around 1930.
Well,
he was outside the box.
He is outside the box, and it's pretty interesting. Are there any recordings of what those instruments were originally designed for? Like, were there good recordings of mandolin orchestras where everybody's chopping and tinkling away on a whole fleet of Gibson F5s?
No, they didn't like the F5.
Oh, they didn't. They liked the 4s better.
They liked the 4s better. The F5s were too. They stuck out too much. Those crisp highs and everything didn't really blend in very well to the orchestra. So that was kind of a case where it wasn't really until Bill Monroe came along 15 years later and figured out what they were good for, that anybody could figure out what they were good for.
It's so crazy that that was only 15 years later. Like it just seems like completely different stuff. And so Bill grabbed a hold of it, and then was it when would you say people were really keeping their eyes out for him after Bill got a hold of him? Was that like when George started, or were people kind of wise to it in those circles before that?
Oh, they were, as soon as he started playing them in the way that he did, people got onto that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But by that time, Gibson had already completely erased the memory banks of how to build one. So they were always a very limited commodity.
It is always surprising because, you know, like the Gibson guitars from the 30s are just gorgeous. And then how fast they went from the 20s and what the F5 was into that nonsense that they were producing just in a second into the 30s. It was just, I mean, it looked like they were angry at something nice. Like they were just like, it was like some passive aggressive thing. Let's put the thickest finish you could possibly find on this and we'll paint them all orange. How about that?
Well, anybody that's tried to build an F5 before will right away figure out how comically unsuited it is to mass production.
Yeah.
Could not be, you could not create a worse instrument to try to mass produce than an F5 mandolin.
It really is. It's pretty crazy. Like when you think about, you know, you and I have thought long and hard about how they made those neck joints so tight. Did you ever get confirmation on any of that? But like, that's another thing. Like once that
trial and error with a shaper fixture.
Yeah. So you think they were cutting fancy shaper fixtures and they just had it dialed in? Because those F4, whenever you pull the fingerboard off one of those F4 mandolins, you're just like, in the teens they were making those things tighter than tight. Where's Dan at? Dan,
they thousands of them, so they got good at it.
Maybe Mr. Earlywine knows something about this. You know how Gibson was cutting their neck joints on the mandolins in the teens?
I don't, but Don McCrosty does.
Does he? All right. Well, let's see here. Hugh, I've had you for an hour, but I want to open it up for other people to ask stuff. And Tyler, did we get to your questions good enough before I start rambling on about different things?
Yeah, that was great.
Awesome. Anybody have any questions for Hugh about what we've seen or talked about so far? Danny West?
Yeah. What kind of epoxy are you using for splines?
I like the West Systems.
Okay.
And,
like 107.
The 105 resin and the 205, or I mean, I'm sorry, the 205 is good too, but I use the 207 hardener.
Okay.
Why? Is clear, and it was kind of specifically designed to be used under finishes, so it doesn't. Sometimes you can get like a moisture bloom under epoxy, and that's no good. So the 207 it makes for a really good general purpose hardener.
Have you had some long enough to find out if it avoids doing what the 20? What is it? What's the slow? The regular slow? Is that 203?
205.
205. You know how that gets amber like after it's been in the can for a while? Like does the 207 do that to you, or does it stay good longer?
It's about the same. It's kind of like the most important thing is if you store it in like a high humidity environment, it can really go south on you. But I don't ever keep it around for longer. Maybe 2 years is kind of max on that. If I'm getting about that long, I'll just buy some fresh stuff.
I recently got some with the pumps, and I'm really happy with the pumps right now.
So you're saying you can use 207 hardener with 205?
Yes.
105. Yeah. 105 resin, 207 hardener.
I've got it right here.
That's the stuff. that what you're going to use when you start building your drift boat?
Yes, but I mix that stuff with a scale.
Yeah, you hit me to that, and I've moved to that too.
It's really accurate, and I'm usually mixing it in such small quantities that it gets very difficult to measure it by volume at small quantities.
Yeah. Let's see here.
And the reason that you use the 207 hardener is because it is clear.
Yeah, it behaves better under finishes is the reason. And when I am gluing, when I'm gluing splices or cracks or anything, I'm almost always adding some of their filler to it. They're like the micro light filler, and some color, like some powdered color to it, because it penetrates so deeply into the wood that it can really turn a glue line dark. And so I add stuff to it to kind of kill that hard line to it.
Well, I missed that. Are you adding the microsphere filler too, or?
It's like the West Systems version of that, but it's
Is there anything that you prefer the 205 for, or have you just completely replaced it with the 207?
I just use that for everything. This stuff right here.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably pretty similar to the 3M product. It's like you open the top of it and it kind of like anti-gravity. Just kind of
Like I'm here to infect you with this. I'm just going to go into the air.
What do you clean? What do you clean up any epoxy when you're doing a crack like that? What do you clean it up with before you're done, before it's dry?
Just a paper towel. If I need to clean up more, I will kind of wet it with a little bit of naphtha. If it's someplace where, if it's like on the inside of the guitar, I'll dab a little bit of acetone on a paper towel and clean it up with that. But I obviously got to be careful with that. But
well, I don't know anything about that.
I try to have it all cleaned off very well. I mean, I don't like to leave any of it around to dry, because it's difficult to get off once you do that.
It is. And then if you get some on your thumb and you're leaving epoxy thumbprints everywhere, that's a real drag too.
Yeah, or like, and also like if that crack is like wet on top, I'll have it clamped together and then just kind of go back and just like dab a little bit more of that filler onto the top of it, and then kind of swipe it with a little bit more epoxy to re-wet it, and it cures real nice that way. Leaves you with a nice full level surface.
So when you say place nice under finishes, the blushing too, but sometimes when you have like that kind of hardness mismatch, it can be difficult to get things to buff out without those lines translated. And do you think that's alleviated a little bit by having the filler in there too, or does that soften things up, or is that not even an issue for you with what you got going on right now?
It's never that large of a surface, really. I mean, I have used that epoxy as a pore filler on wood before. I used it for a while on mandolin headstocks. I use super glue for that now, just kind of wetting it with super glue and sanding it to seal itself. But I guess that was probably the main reason that I switched over to that. But I mean, the mini, you could use 205 without any problems. If I had 205 around, I would use it. But
what's your favorite glue for a broken peg head?
I was just going to ask if you're using West for peg heads now, or if you're still tight bond.
Boy, it really just depends on the circumstance. If it's been broken, if somebody's already glued it once before and I'm redoing it, then for sure epoxy. It's that one's just kind of an anything goes.
How about hide glue?
You won't run into anybody that loves hide glue more than me, because of the way that it resists creep and the way how strong it is, and how much it has like withstood the test of time. But unless you can get both surfaces apart and properly prepare them, and glue them together without having to really water your glue down, then I really don't like hide glue at all for gluing cracks. If it was on a violin and I had the plate off and I had it completely separated and I could get it apart and get it together, absolutely. But where I'm trying to work glue down into something, I mean, you can do it. You can use the old brown glue, but hide glue loses its strength so fast once it drops in temperature, and the more you water it down, the more you weaken it. So you're if it's a surface that is not really meant to have hide glue on it like that, then I don't like it for that.
But if you have both parts completely apart and clean, hot hide glue would be a good one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If I can get it apart and if I can get it clean and I can get it clamped together in the proper amount of time without having to water the glue down, then absolutely, it's very strong.
What's your surface prep for hide glue like now? You know, when I think Andy was the first one to show me hide glue at Groans, and I think he wetted both surfaces maybe, or I can't remember how he showed me. I remember he was very liberal with his application. I think he showed me on a bridge and he just like basically got glue over the entire top and then just kind of put the bridge down and then wiped up. But what, like when you're gluing a bridge, what's your kind of ritual between the ebony and the spruce for getting them ready to go together? Are you heating stuff, or?
They're sanded. I will usually tooth the ebony.
Mm-hmm.
So like what you see, like how the Martin and Gibson bridges look like when you take them off. The bottoms of them are toothed. I wipe either a rosewood or an ebony bridge with acetone until I stop getting a bunch of black stuff off of it, and then I'll dry it. I'll heat it. Everything is heating up. I'm heating up the bridge. You can't heat the surface of the top very much without melting your lacquer, but yeah, just warm it up a little bit. Really get the bridge really nice and hot before you put the glue on there. And put the glue on there, and you better be clamped up in 30 seconds to a minute. You're probably really pushing it.
Do you have like any kind of like, I mean, if you get over like a certain amount of time, are you just pulling it apart and just wiping it down and getting ready for a second?
Yeah, if you're not ready to go, if your setup's not dialed, then as soon as it hits that gel point, which is about, I don't know, 125, 130, something like that. As soon as that gel hits, you're game over. And you can always tell if you've taken a bridge off because of an unsuccessful hide glue attempt. You can always tell because there's no wood that pulls up with it. It's just like a clear spot of glue on the bottom of the bridge. There won't be any skin on it in that area. So that one is very obvious when that's happened.
Can you tell like if you're like getting your last clamp on and then you look and you see like gelled glue on the top, is that a good indication that you missed it?
No, if you've gotten good squeeze out and you're in the proper time frame, you'll only have to screw that up a few times before you know not to do that anymore. It'll fail pretty quick.
What's your general approach to removing a bridge?
I do it pretty much the same way as Ian does, I think, or I'm just kind of have a template that goes around it and heating it with a UV bulb. And then, working it, reading the run out and working it from either side with palette knives, and kind of just like letting the force that it requires to put that palette knife under there kind of be the guide for how much heat I give it. If you're having to force it too much, then you're going to be ripping wood out. Like it kind of tells you when it's ready.
Did you come up with the Don Teeter mallet of the gods approach to pulling bridges off? Was that ever part of your repertoire?
I learned that in Red Wing.
Did you?
Yeah.
For anybody who doesn't know, Don Teeter has a book, Acoustic Guitar Volume 1 and 2, and I was taught this too, which is you just take a kind of like a bullnose chisel or something, you kind of grind something off, and then you whack, you put it on the front of the bridge. Yeah.
That was there's my Red Wing bridge removal chisel.
You didn't go through the violin program. I heard Elizabeth got real upset about plastic handle chisels for some reason, but yeah, you whack that thing, and you're shocking the high glue, right? This is what they never told you, was that this is really, you're only supposed to really do this on high glue guitars.
Well, yeah, but even on hide glue, you better be like pretty far down the road of failure before you attempt that method. The crazy thing is that it actually works.
Oh my God, Buzzy did one. It's
like the other 20% of the time that it just like rips a huge chunk of the top out. Too.
Buzzy did one. I think just to
start thinking of a better way to go about that.
He did one like probably 2 years ago, and pulled his jersey out of the rafters to show everybody how a bridge pop was done the old-fashioned way, and oh boy, it worked. It stunned everybody in the room, because Tom and I were looking at it going, good thing you know somebody good at touch-up, Buzzy.
Yeah, well, you'll see a lot of old Martins that have like a whole bunch of wood ripped out in front of them.
Do you ever route them off?
What's that?
Do you ever take a router and route it right down real thin and then heat it, peel it off?
I've never had to do that, but if the situation called for it, I would do it. I'd probably strap it down on the old neck jig and put it in the milling machine. And
oh yeah, that'd be tops. Dan, did you have a relationship with Don Teeter? Did you guys hang out?
I met him at the Asia convention once out east. That was the first time I met him back in the 80s. And Bart Ryder that used to work at Elderly's.
He's the banjo guy.
Yeah. And Bart was there, and there was a basketball game on. It was the playoffs, and Bart came down with a fifth of Jack Daniels. He didn't go downtown to the shows or anything. He wanted to watch the game. And as we were leaving, Don Teeter walked down, and he was heading out, and Bart was already pretty gone. And he said, "Don, I love you, man." And he was hugging Don Teeter. And he said, "Come on, man, have a drink with me." And Don says, No, I don't touch the stuff. And we left, and we came back 4 hours later, and they were both laid out on the couch, drunk and asleep.
Well, that'll happen. That will happen.
At the NAMM show one time, I went around with Dick Folk and Chris Martin, and we gave Don Teeter the Lifetime Achievement Award. And he was so proud and happy. And Chris Martin gave him a silk Martin jacket to wear. I got a photo of it somewhere. Teeter was a good man.
Did he come up in the Martin factory? Was he their warranty guy or something at one point? Or
he wasn't out in Oklahoma, I think he was.
Oh, okay.
But no.
Hugh, what were you going to show us there with the bridge plates? You're pulling up bridge plates to show us.
These are some collectible Don Teeter bridge plates that were moved from vintage guitars.
Oh my goodness!
It was a signature move, and like if the bridge plate was cracked, he glued a piece on in front of the bridge plate, and then a piece on behind it, and then put one of these bad boys over the whole big fat mess.
What kind of guitar?
So wait, was that bridge plate in there like a Verzi? Was it like off the deck a piece, or?
No, it was just the original plate, and then a second plate in front of it, and then a second plate behind it, and another plate over the top of those.
Okay.
These are both, I think one of these is maybe a 36, and one of them maybe a 37, like 0028.
Oh,
You know, someday people will be pulling my nonsense out of guitars, scratching their heads. What in the
Don
world?
Teeter passed away this year.
Oh, he did.
Yep.
Well, he cut a lot of new ground. I mean, that's I don't judge him harshly. I mean, his history is what it is. But you know, when he was doing that, guitars were not
What they are
now, and so
They weren't what they are, and
who have approached them the way that we're approaching them now would really have been pretty weird and unreasonable, given what they were worth and what people were willing to pay to fix them and everything. So,
yeah,
I learned how to measure. I learned how to measure in thousandths of an inch from Teeter. Before that, I had no idea what that meant. And he had the machinist approach to guitar repair. What is your approach to taking bridge plates out?
Well, I use the heat blankets from LMI. I usually back them with an aluminum caul that I've made that I'll also heat up. Of course, you have to pay very close attention to what the run out is doing. Once they're there again, like with the bridge, it's kind of like it's going to let you know when it's ready to have that pallet knife pushed in. I'll heat the pallet knife as well, and I've got the whole assortment of every odd size I can think of, and always get more if I need them. But just work it a little bit at a time. Usually, if it's a tucked Martin bridge plate, then I'll cut it in half across the middle, either with like a little saw or just with an X-Acto knife, so that I can break it right down the center seam, so that I can work each side independently to get the wiggle the bridge plates out of where it's tucked under the X brace. I'm not a fan of trying to retuck them. I fill those cavities with spruce and hide glue and trim them down, and then just flush the new plate up against it. But resetting that, oftentimes the failure of a Martin bridge plate is due to where it's located, and obviously you can't really change that by just working within the current footprint of the existing plate. Oftentimes, like if you're seeing the little gap in front of the bridge plate between the top and the bridge plate, that's because the spruce is ripping loose, like with the plate. So just heating that and pushing it back doesn't really solve that problem.
Yeah, that puckered bridge plate phenomenon, like that's what a lot of people are trying to alleviate with that heating thing, right? And that puckered bridge plate is that's like phase one of catastrophic failure at that spot, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and it depends. Like sometimes those tops are so strong and so stiff, and the bridge plate can be on in just a bad place and can be like looking like it's pulling loose and everything like that. And sometimes you can, just like work hot water and glue into the front end of that plate and heat up an aluminum caul and clamp it and everything. And they can work that way, but most of the time not. And the liability of when people buy and sell those things, that the originality and the integrity of that bridge plate is so important in that equation, that things that can kind of enable people to mislead others about the true condition of an instrument present kind of significant problems. you don't. I mean, there's I dish out enough disappointment to like people that just bought vintage guitars that I don't like to see more sources for that.
Yeah, that thing, boy, I tell you what, like shady stuff at the bridge plate, man. That's like, oh man, it's gonna be a hard life for that guitar. David wants to know if you repair bridge plates. Is there anything that you're gonna do? Will you ever put a cap over it? Will you ever put a plate mate over it? Will you ever do?
If it's cracked, it's a done deal.
What about Wallard holes? You doing anything to it?
I'll repair worn pinholes using West Systems epoxy and the filler and some color, and putting some masking tape under the bottom, kind of like chamfering those holes with a countersink a little bit so that it gives it a kind of something to push up against. And that's very unintrusive, and that's a pretty effective technique.
I think it is too. Matter of fact, well, I'll tell you what, like nothing makes, I've never gotten responses from customers quite like when you repair Wallard out bridge pin holes and you get those bridge pins back on the bridge plate. Like it's something about them going up those holes, like really is just like an overtone killer. I don't fully understand why, but every time I've repaired those bridge pin holes, people are like, oh my God, I can't believe the sound of this guitar.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
Either one of you guys ever find a use for the bridge doctor at all?
Well, I personally installed probably 500 million of them at Breedlove, and the only thing I found they worked for was reducing arm hair on my forearm. But Hugh, have you used one to any effect? I mean, I would say like on a Takamine 12 string, like that was pulling up, you might get there from here.
I'd just get a new guitar, but
oh, okay.
I don't know. Yeah, you could. It's not something I've ever done.
It's been so long, Eric. It's been so long since when I was coming up in the 90s, like it was something that was being employed every once in a while in our shop, and I didn't fully understand it. Like I always thought, because to me, like if a top bellies like and it doesn't need a neck reset, I'm kind of like, whatever. But I don't know. Did you have any reason why you're asking about it? Are you thinking about it for like alleviating neck sets on Yamaha FGs or something? Or
yeah, I've had a few around that time period where I've used them. It's worked well to do that on a guitar that really isn't worth doing the neck set on, and it's got a belly on it.
Were you able to get it back into shape?
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
cool.
I'm not a fan of shaving the bridge, which someone that I used to work with was a big fan of shaving the bridge down to alleviate that, which makes me like cringe.
Yeah.
But the bridge doctors seem to help that quite a bit. And, I think they're like $20 or something.
Yeah,
so.
they are. The if you're getting the JLD one, like we used at Breedlove, that Teflon insert can be upgraded to a metal insert, and then you can really torque the bejesus out of that.
That would be fun
if you're into it, because you'll strip that Teflon out if you really try to torque it back. But boy, I bet Hugh hasn't even thought about a bridge plate or a bridge doctor. What did you used to call him, Doctor?
Nah, I don't want to say.
Oh, okay.
but it makes me think of those like those mid '60s Gibson J200s that have like the flying buttress inside.
Yeah.
There's
what's
like
that?
Spruce log that goes all the way across the middle.
Yeah.
It's got a threaded post underneath it that pushes up on the front of the bridge plate. The crazy thing is that you would just be certain that has got to be like hurting the sound of the guitar. And I've punched a few of those things out of there, and it doesn't make a damn bit of difference.
It's funny. Like I remember selling somebody on the idea of getting rid of their ceramic bridge on a Gibson. Oh, we'll get you a real wood bridge with a real bone saddle. I'm pretty sure that guitar went backwards sonically. I don't know. Like I don't know what the deal is with those stupid ceramic bridges, or saddles, but I definitely was a little sheepish in handing that guitar after making some outlandish claims about doing things the right way and getting more timbre out of something.
It kind of speaks to the rest of the guitar. If it makes no difference whether you have a wood bridge glued down to the top or a plastic bridge that's like screwed on.
Yeah. I think it does. Yeah, those plastic bridges, man, God, can you imagine the sales meeting that produced that? I mean, those guys must have been out of their minds.
Well, like a lot of things, they really held the users of their product in contempt. They really thought that no one would notice the difference, and I think that they would have had to have known better, but they really did not think that anybody would notice or care.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as the 50s turned into the 60s and the 60s turned into the 70s, I mean, people's they were definitely had their priorities focused on something other than, fine guitars, Yeah, I wonder, like those 30s and so guitars, I mean, like that depression era where everybody was fighting to keep their job. I wonder if that had something to do with how good those guitars were. Like everybody was real focused.
Hey, you guys, I have to leave, but I really enjoyed this. Thank you, Hugh.
You bet.
Hey, one more thing. Today. Awesome, Dan. Yep. Thanks for coming, man.
Always. This is the greatest thing in my life.
All right.
It's fun.
Hugh, Dan's got or David's got one. We'll make this the last question. Bye, Dan. We'll make this the last question. What are your thoughts on K&K pickups? And is there a value range on where you, like, if a customer asks you to put an output jack in an old guitar, are you like, not on my watch, their homes, or are you free to be you and me with the end pin reamer?
Nashville, if Tim O'Brien wants me to put one in, I'm gonna put one in. If people know what they're asking for, and it makes sense, then yes. But K&Ks often are the least bad option for pickups. I mean, that's mostly what I use on mandolin. In my perfect world, the United Nations probably would get together and do something to ban user pickups, but I take more of them out than I put in, but I understand the purpose for them, and sometimes no way around it. And yeah, K&Ks are fine.
You want to actually, one more thing you want to briefly tell, you have a high profile client who is a Fishman endorser, and his tech gave you a tip on how to balance Fishman pickups. You want to, can you relay that information? What?
I do remember that.
Yeah.
You I'm sure anyone in here that has ever installed these things knows how frustrating it can be to get a perfect balance on those. And sometimes you can do everything right. You can cut that slot with your fancy milling machine, and that baby can be flat as a pancake, and you put that pickup in there and it still isn't right. You go around and around and around on that, and he told me that that the way that he does it is that he starts with a box of about 30 of them, and then he puts them in, and if they don't balance, he cuts them out and throws them in the trash can and puts another one in. And I didn't feel so bad anymore then. And then when he gets one that balances right, then he's done.
All right. Well, Hugh, with that, we're going to let you go, and everybody unmute and tell Hugh thank you, because man, this was another good one. This was some more baller stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys,
hey,
good to be here.
All right, thanks, man. I'll talk to you later, and bye, everybody. Next week is Ding Kings, and we're gonna be buffing up our boards. So if anybody's having any problems getting their finish on their board, let me know, and we'll get it going.